All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the music and pass it on over to Airam Coronado of MILPA.
Hey, buenas tardes, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Si ocupan interpretación en español, por favor, presione el símbolo del mundo que está abajo. Once again, thank you all for joining. My name is Ram Coronado. I now work with MILPA. I'm here with Alexis Magdaleno from MILPA and Andrea Rocha from Angels of Change 831. The purpose of this presentation is to give a brief overview of how the county budget works and how you can all get more involved. We do have some disclaimers we would like to share before we begin. We're not experts or legal advisors or professionals on the topic we're about to share, and we do not work for the Board of Supervisors. We're regular folks from the community who are concerned about the Monterey County budget. This presentation will cover demands from local organizations just like Bocton 12, Chinampa, Ages of Change, MILPA, and Save Ag, Save Schools. Once again, if you need translation, please click the button in the bottom. Si ocupan traslación en español, por favor presione el símbolo del mundo. Who are we? Organizations work for the healing, health, and success of our communities, and most importantly, for those who have been impacted by the carceral system and racism. Our intentions and purpose: we as the community members demand the Monterey County Board of Supervisors to reinvest back into building community service infrastructure and prioritize community health and prosperity by realigning, reimagining, and relocating the budget. The following presentation will go into details of how we can do this. But once again, before we begin, we want to acknowledge the ancestral land of the Ohlone, Costanoan, Esalen, Amamatsun, and Selenian Nation that are now traditional owners of this land, which we now know as Monterey County. And we sometimes have this question, right? Firstly, who are the County Board of Supervisors and what do they do? The County Board of Supervisors are elected officials who sit in decision tables and are supposed to represent those within their jurisdiction. These officials are like mayors who represent a county jurisdiction and unincorporated areas just like Moss Landing and Prundell, who make decisions and are represented by their assigned Board of Supervisors. But until recent times, we've seen more and more community members voice their needs and concerns because of lack of representation and services, which are needed in our community's health and well-being, that have not been met by our representatives. Just like probation department, sheriff's office, public defenders, and all county employees, they make the budget that impact us in so many ways. They control mental health services, child protective services, house and economic development, who plan, coordinate, and facilitate the county efforts and retain and grow business and jobs. And we provide affordable housing through the county and so much more. And this is just a visual if you're wondering who are County Board of Supervisors. This is just a visual. On the next slides, we'll be telling you who represents you and what area they represent. So Luis Alejo represents District 1. His area is most of the city of Salinas, including the Alisal parts in Central and North Salinas, Chinatown, and part of Old Town Salinas. John M. Phillips represents District 2. His areas are Baranda, Castroville, Las Lomas, Moss Landing, Pájaro, Prundell, Royal Oaks, the northern neighborhoods of the city of Salinas, and those portions of the community of Aromas that are located within Monterey County. Chris Lopez represents District 3. His areas are incorporated community of Spreckles, Chular, and Jolon, the eastern portion of the city of Salinas, the city of Gonzales, Greenfield, Soledad, and King City, the military installation of Fort Hunter, Leggett, and Camp Roberts, and the portion of Los Padres National Forest. Wendy Root Askew represents District 4. Her areas are a portion of the city of Salinas, the cities of Del Rey Oaks, Marina, Seaside, Sand City, and the former military installation of Fort Ord. District 5, Mary Ellen Adams represents District 5. Her areas are Carmel by the Sea, Monterey, and Pacific Grove, unincorporated communities of Carmel Valley, Big Sur, Pebble Beach, San Venancio, Corral del Tierra, and Jamesburg. Also, military installations of the Presidio Monterey, the Defense Language of Institute, and the Naval Postgraduate School, and the Ventana Wilderness area of the Los Padres National Forest.
Okay, everyone. Hi, my name is Andrea. And so now we have an idea of who our Board of Supervisors are. Just a reminder again, we have Luis Alejo in District 1, John M. Phillips in District 2, Chris Lopez in District 3, Wendy Root Askew in District 4, and Mary Adams in District 5. And another disclaimer I just want to share that this presentation is really meant to be basic level, very simple understanding to give you all an overview of kind of how it's set up, how it's broken down. So now that we know who our elected Board of Supervisors are, I'd like for us to take a look at this simple breakdown in front of us of how the county leadership is organized. At the top of the chart are you and me, the voters. As voters, we get to choose who the county officials are and who the County Board of Supervisors are. So the County Board of Supervisors is then given a huge amount of responsibility and power as they manage all of the funding that goes into the different county departments and who gets to be appointed. Another reminder that the Board of Supervisors governs all of these departments you see in the yellow and oversees the county appointed officials here in the green on the left side. The Board of Supervisors determines the salaries that everyone in these departments gets and what their annual funds are going to be. When you think about all the services that we receive from the county, such as behavioral health, libraries, resource management, and social services, take note of what they offer, and what you receive is a direct result of the funds that they have to work with, and those funds are decided by the Board of Supervisors. And these departments have a major influence on our everyday lives, our health, our water quality, our justice system in the court of law. So it's just kind of a representation here of how it all trickles down and what that looks like. So let's go to the next slide. So moving on to the next slide. Each year across California, the counties work to craft their annual budgets. And because the counties perform functions required by the state and receive a significant amount of funding through the state budget, the county budgets, to a certain degree, will reflect the policies and the funding choices made by the governor and by state legislature. However, the funding and the spending plans will also reflect the priorities of the local residents and policymakers. And so in the yellow, I've highlighted who the major players are, which are the Board of Supervisors, the county manager, who will then take all of the stuff that we, the public, are requesting and create the
del condado y también al administrador del condado.
Now that we have this idea of
Ahora que
and what they do and how the leadership is sort of broken down, let's go into what a calendar year looks like. And this calendar year, I'm going to break it down to kind of show us how certain areas of the year are really important with our activism and getting our voices heard. And certain times of the year, we're not going to be able to get as much done. So let's let's go into the calendar now. So by January 10th of every year, the governor will release a proposed state budget for the upcoming year, and the Board of Supervisors will have an idea of what they're going to be able to work with for the coming year. And as of now, we're in February, and at the middle here in purple, February, March, and April. This is the sweet spot. So if you want to do advocacy, this is the most impactful time to contribute right now. It's an important time for community members to be involved with this step of the budget process because county departments are submitting requests at this time. And it's just a very crucial time to get involved. There's a lot of work to be done, especially with department committees, such as the Budget Committee or the Legislative Committee, which do a lot of policymaking and practices. And this is the time to voice your concerns to the Board of Supervisors and attend workshops that they often hold during these months. We encourage everyone to stay connected to the county website right now, starting now, and to check in every week for the updated calendar. I just actually looked at the calendar recently, and there's already meetings starting now, and they've been starting since January. So if you want to get involved, there was just a budget meeting a few days ago. So now's the time. This is also the segment of time, February, March, and April, when the county manager will actively start drafting the recommended budget. And here on the right in the pink, by the time May and June come around, the recommended budget will be completed and available for public viewing. By the 30th of June, the Board of Supervisors is expected to have a public hearing, which we encourage everyone to attend, and the dates will be posted on the county calendar. Following the public hearing, the Board of Supervisors will either approve the budget under the condition that some revisions might be made or will be made, and then the other option could be that they just formally adopt the budget as it is. And as community members, if we see areas for improvement or change needed to the recommended budget, we need to show up and participate so we can attest to the Board of Supervisors that the community has been involved along every step of the way. And to clarify again, February, March, April, it's time to do a lot of work. June 30th is the day to finalize everything, and it's the day where everything closes out, unless we're going to make those minor revisions to the recommended budget. Let's go to the next slide. So this is just another reminder for everyone that all the info that I'm sharing here, it's taken directly from an infographic that was found from the county website. And to be very honest, what I'm showing here is broken down the most simplified way. There was so much more information, so I'm trying to give you just the nuts and bolts here of the most important parts. So basically, if the budget wasn't adopted but required revisions, then an updated version will get drafted by the county manager. And there will be another public hearing for community members to participate. So you can show up here if there are changes you would still like to be made. And through the months of July, September, and October, departments will go back and forth to request for more funding. And then through November and December, the budget will roll out and the county will operate as it needs to. And then throughout this time too, if need be, the county manager will also provide budget updates to the board. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now that we know what a calendar year looks like, preparation in January, a lot of activism showing up, going to hearings, going to budget meetings, going to committee meetings in February, March, and April, recommended budgets available by June. If there's revisions made, they need to be made by October, and then it kind of rolls out from there. But June 30th is like a big date. So we have that in mind. So what is the general fund? What is that actual money? What is it composed of? There are two important words that I want to bring up when we talk about what the general fund is. There's program revenue, and then there's non-program revenue. So program revenue comes from state and federal aid, and it's specifically designated and or required for programs mainly in the fields of health and social services. And it makes up about 2/3 of the general fund and includes the light blue area I have here at the bottom and the orange area titled charges for services and the pink area titled other financing sources. Non-program revenues are primarily derived from taxes, including property taxes, transient occupancy taxes, the sales and use taxes that we pay when we purchase anything in the store, cannabis tax, investment income, tobacco settlement monies, franchise fees, and non-program revenues are discretionary funds for the county to address local priorities. And that's 34% of what the general fund is made up of, is of our taxes. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is just another example of the graph I just showed you, but I added the dollar amount so we can just get an idea of how much money we're working with. And I took this directly from the budget in brief from 2020 to 2021. And here at the top left in the blue, again, that's the 34% that we pay in taxes and dollar amounts here. So that's $227 million. And it just kind of further explains in dollar amounts what that looks like. So just take a minute to look over it and see, yeah, make your own assessments based on that. That's what our fund is composed of. So let's go to the next slide. So now that we know what the general fund is made up of, these non-program revenues and program revenues, the next question is, how is it distributed? How does the county decide what goes where? And then what do we as citizens get to receive, and how do we get to thrive and strive based off of what we're getting? So have you ever wondered about why there isn't more affordable housing, or how to keep our schools safe from harmful pesticides? The funds that go into county departments like Housing and Economic Development or the Agricultural Commissioner are decided by the Board of Supervisors based on community needs. As community members, we can get involved and make an impact by showing up to meetings, attending hearings, committees, and contacting our policymakers, like public comments, for example, at Board of Supervisor meetings. So I just included some images here just to give us an idea of what we get involved with as a community. Do we go to the libraries a lot? You know, do we have elderly family members who receive support from the county, or any of our family members, social workers, or working with the probation department or the sheriff's department? So let's take a look and to see how the general fund is distributed. Okay. That's one too far. Can you go back one more? There we go. Thank you. So let's take a moment to look at this graph and consider which areas get the most funding and which ones get the least. Also take a moment to consider that the largest portions represent several different departments within them. The way the money is spent within a community should reflect the needs of that respective community. So let's take another moment to consider what you would long to see more of or experience more of in your community. What would you long to see more of? What are you aspiring for in your community? For one, I would like to see more affordable housing, more community gardens and well-maintained parks. I want to see more protection for our water wells from saline intrusion. I want to see more programs for healing and wellness education for the youth. That's really important for me. And it's clear to me, based on the graph in front of us, that the areas in which I wish to see improvement are among the least funded in the Monterey County. The largest section of this chart is titled Public Safety and Protection, and it actually represents 8 different county departments within it. So if you dig a little bit deeper into the charts on the budget in brief from 2020 to 2021, you will see that the distribution among the funds isn't very balanced. And I'm going to break that down just a little bit further for you in this next slide. But before we do, just take a minute to look at this graph again and just consider, you know, how much is education receiving? How much is recreation and culture receiving? How much is health and sanitation receiving? It's just, here it is laid out for you. Can't be any more simple. It's straight from the budget in brief, 2020 to 2021. So let's go to the next slide. We'll break it down further. And don't forget the green little area in the chart that I showed you. Okay, so this is a breakdown of the green portion from the pie chart in the previous slide. Remember that portion, how I mentioned that entire chunk, public safety and protection, was made up of 8 different departments? Well, here they are listed for you. Public safety and protection accounts for 38% of the entire county budget. And remember, the entire county budget equates to $227.1 million. So of the $227.1 million, 63% is going strictly to law enforcement. And I highlighted in red, there's the 3 departments that receive the majority of the funding, which are the probation department, the sheriff coroner, and the district attorney. And the remaining 37% will be divided among 5 other essential departments. So let's take a moment to consider what our budget could look like with a reprioritized budget. In the blue, I've highlighted the 2 least funded departments. So child support services, who receive 0.043%, and housing and economic development, who receive 0.006%. Let's consider how the information you see here relates to the housing issue, to homelessness, to transparency and awareness around pesticides in our neighborhoods and in our schools, and to our perception of safety versus restorative justice and community education. I hope that this image can help you see how the budget is not balanced and how departments that support community development and provide opportunities for our community to thrive and succeed are the least funded and the most neglected. And I want to leave us with this question: what would the community look like if we prioritize community support over community enforcement? Let's go to the next slide. So this is a graph on the left that shows us from left to right the decrease in inmate population among Monterey County Jail, which is in the orange, Monterey County Juvenile Hall, which is in the gray, and Monterey County Youth Center in the lighter white color. Between 2010, on the left to 2020 on the right, the population has reduced by the hundreds, as you can see as the graph's going to the right. Yeah, so between 2010 to 2020, it's reduced by the hundreds. And the chart on the right shows that there has been an increase in funding for both the Monterey County Sheriff and the Monterey County Probation Department between 2016 to 2020. And even though our inmate population is going down, the budget keeps going up. So this is just, it couldn't be any clearer here. Like we're wondering what this is about and how we can possibly reprioritize our budget. And I'd like to invite Alexis or Airam if they have anything else to say about this image here, this slide.
Yeah, buenas noches, everybody. Alexis McDonough with MILPA. Yeah, for me, for myself, this is always a troubling image because statewide, our crime levels are going down, and locally, our inmate populations are going down. But our budgets for sheriff and probation continue to rise, and our investment into their departments continue to rise, despite the fact that we know that essential services, wraparound services are vastly more impactful in reducing crime and ensuring public safety. And so for me, it's always a problem, to see that their budget keeps rising, but our inmate population keeps lowering and is going to continue to lower. Our inmate population is going to continue to go down. Since 2014, the state of California has been passing laws that not only reduce the amount of inmates and the amount of sentencing that we have, but it also increases the amount of services our community has. And it's going to continue to get lower as new laws from the state of California continue to decrease the amount of people spend on probation, decrease the amount of time that people spend for drug-related crimes, and hopefully, our youth population continues to go down. But it's always alarming to see the budget continue to go up, because you wonder how many other services could we have had we not invested this $25 million into the sheriff's department and into the probation department. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So as community members, as coalition members, and community advocates, what is it that we want to see in our community, in our county, and what is it that we've seen that works, and what investments, priorities, and values do we want the Monterey County Board of Supervisors to know that we care about? And so through our time kind of interacting with each other and interacting with our community members, our neighbors, our experiences, our lived experiences, we want the county to invest in the following priorities. And that includes physical, mental, behavioral health. We want them to prioritize positive youth development. We want them to prioritize healing, employment, housing, and a fresh start. But how do we do that? And what does that actually look like when we ask our Board of Supervisors? So here's what we were envisioning. When we say physical and mental and behavioral health, this is a very big portion of our demand. But we really want the Board of Supervisors to start funding and prioritizing the community-based prevention programs that we know that work, that we know that when we have more resources in our community, that people are safer, people feel that there's options for them, and there's ways that they can help their family members, their community members, without necessarily resorting always to locking up people for having a mental health crisis, or for having substance abuse, for struggling with substance abuse. And when our communities have those resources available to treat the direct problem of poverty, of addiction, of mental health, then our communities are a lot safer. And we really want to prioritize that, because this is what's actually going to work. And now more than ever have we seen that through COVID and this everything that we're experiencing, we're now realizing that these are actually things that we should have invested in a long time ago. But now that these problems are exacerbated, we're like, wow, why didn't we have these things before? And so, but it doesn't just end there. Our public health is also important. because it impacts everybody. And one of those things that we include is our environmental health hazards, and that includes pesticides. A lot of times we don't know when pesticides are being sprayed in our community. It's a silent killer. Everybody wants to know when there's a COVID outbreak, but we don't never know when pesticides are being sprayed in our community. A lot of times, unless you can't smell it, you can't see it, you can't taste it, but it's there. And there's so many impacts that it has. It's in our water, it's in our food, it's on our clothes. And so it's important for us as community members to know that those pesticides were just sprayed. Like if pesticides were being sprayed in your community, in your neighborhood, the helicopter flows by and you didn't know, maybe you were out there in the park, or maybe you were rolling around in the grass, and you might have it all over yourself. You might be ingesting those things. But we also want them to invest in programs like Esperanza Care, healthcare for our low income farm working communities, our undocumented folks who work so hard, and especially throughout this COVID-19, they were the hardest impacted, and they were the first ones on the front lines, continuing to work despite when the whole state was under lockdown. And so again, we want to take a whole different approach to mental behavioral health, where people can actually receive the services, the health, and the well-being in their own community, and ensure equity and for these health conditions. We also want the Monterey County Board of Supervisors to prioritize, have no department within the Monterey County Board of Supervisors that is directly tied to the health and well-being and the development of our Monterey County youth. We have nobody no department that just directly focuses on the health of our youth. And so for us, we want to prioritize that. We want to make a coalition of county departments that say, hey, this is exactly what youth in our county need, and this is how we can be meeting their demands. And that's that. We also want to prioritize healing. And our county, unfortunately, has invested a lot in the pain and the trauma of our youth. And it has been going on for years. Our county has prioritized incarceration. It has prioritized policing far before the actual needs of our community members, of our youth. And so there's been a lot of pain, a lot of damage that has occurred to those young people within the systems, within the care of our Monterey County departments. And so the first thing that we want the Monterey County Board of Supervisors to do is consolidate the youth center with the new juvenile hall. If y'all didn't know, Monterey County is getting a brand new juvenile hall. It has a capacity for more youth than we can possibly fit in there. There's more space than there is need for that facility. And our Monterey County Youth Center only houses about 20 youth. So the new juvenile hall will have the capacity to house both of these places. And so that's what we want them to do. But aside from that, we want them to move away from incarceration of youth and start building a system that approaches our young people with wraparound services for reentry that is focused on healing, wellness, and individual wholeness. What does that look like? It looks like everything else in our demands. But as of right now, youth come out of incarceration, it's like, well, you're kind of on your own. And we don't want that. We actually want them to address the issues, the mental health crisis. We want them to address housing. We want them to address all those things that youth need to get on their feet and to live healthy, productive lives, like education, housing. We want all those services available to them so that so that they don't end up in situations where they're violating probation, where they're coming in contact again with the juvenile justice system. And just equally as important, we want them to fund employment. This includes on-the-job training. We want them to start really funding job training programs and other community-based educational programs, especially those which can help minimize the substance abuse related incarceration of poor, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. This has been a large priority for us también. And the big reason for this is because when you have employment, when you have not only just employment, but quality employment and quality training, your community is going to be a lot safer. Your family is going to be more well off, and we want that for our most vulnerable people, our people who are more likely to cause harm. We want them to have quality employment so that they can, focus on helping their families and all of that stuff. We also want them to start funding housing. Housing is something that should have been funded appropriately a long time ago, but now because of COVID-19 and the housing crisis that we're experiencing here in Monterey County, we're now realizing that we should have funded this a long time ago, but we can only do so much within a short period of time, and so we're seeing families being pushed out of their communities. We're seeing families from the Bay Area coming over here and outpricing us, moving us further and further away from the communities that we work in or grew up in. And housing is an important issue, because when folks come home out of incarceration or folks are struggling with homelessness, if they don't have that housing support, those housing resources, it can really affect the trajectory of where they'll go or where they'll end up and the decisions that they'll make. Housing is public safety. Housing is public health, and we want them to prioritize and invest a lot more in that. We also want them to start investing in a fresh start. We have so many people under county-wide supervision for minor offenses such as drugs, for petty theft and things that instead of incarcerating them, we can start helping them get a clean start and find employment, find housing, find all those things, education. I myself work directly in helping people clear or reduce their felonies and misdemeanors, and it's a game changer when you've paid your dues, you've done your time, and you still have to and that record still affects you. It's a game changer when you can say, hey, this is my past. It's no longer here. It's no longer visible. I'm just a regular person who just wants to work and help his family or his or her family and just do their thing, get housing, do all those things. And so what can we do? As community members, there's so much we can do. As we heard like earlier, Andrea and Iram talk, the county board of supervisors is something that not a lot of people, not a lot of community members engage in, and a lot of times they hear from very few people, and so but it's also very intimidating. The meetings are long, the language is complicated, the places, the times where you can speak is just it can be very intimidating to go provide public comment, to call your board of supervisor. And a lot of times we don't see our board of supervisors. And that's where we made it a priority to even bring them up directly, because a lot of times we don't see them in the community the same way we see our mayors or our city council people. And so what can we do? How can we get our voice heard? How can we as regular community members who maybe work all day or go to school and like maybe don't have time to make it to those board of supervisors meetings, what can we do to let them know that housing is a priority, that that employment is a priority, that healing is a priority, that mental health is a priority? Well, if we have the capacity, we can advocate during our county budget meetings. Usually they meet on Tuesdays, during the day, different times. But if we can make it, during those times that Andrea mentioned, that sweet spot that we're in right now in February, March, and April, where they're asking community members and their departments to say, what do you need? This is where we as community members come in and say, this is what we want. You can also call them. You can email them. If you don't have time, you can also call them and email them and say, hey, everything that we talked about today or everything that you want to see in your community, this is what you want your board of supervisors to vote on and to invest in. And you can also join our efforts. Join our efforts and our demands. We're going to be listing all of these all of the places where you can find their calendar for when they're going to be meeting. You can find the list of who your board of supervisor is, and you can find the link to our Facebook pages, our Instagram pages, where you can kind of stay in the loop of what we're doing or what we're asking our board of supervisors to do. We're also going to be putting out a sign-on letter saying that you agree with these demands and you actually want your board of supervisor to know. The last thing that you can do is apply to serve on a committee. If you have the capacity, if you have the willpower to join some of these committees. A lot of times these committees stay empty, or it's the same people, or so as community members, it's important for us to sit on these committees because we can have a real impact, a real seat at the table of what you want to prioritize. And there's a committee for everything. There's a committee for juvenile justice. There's a committee for mental health. There's a committee for parks. There's a committee for water. There's a committee for ag. There's a committee for everything. We're gonna put a list of a link to the different committees that exist in our county. And hopefully, if you're willing and able, you have capacity to serve on those, definitely apply and hit us up if you have any questions. And that's kind of it. That's our presentation. We hope you got a lot from it. Again, us as community members and as community advocates and people who go up there a lot of times to those board of supervisor meetings, we still struggle understanding the process. And to us, it's still like intimidating. It's still a learning curve, but it's definitely something that's worth it because we can have a real big impact because it's a huge budget. It's a budget that controls a whole county, and we can have a real impact on what it is that we want. And hopefully we get some of those things now that we're more aware of what happens there. So we want to open it up for questions and answers. I'm not quite sure. I can't see the questions. Maybe Rosada can help us out and share some of the questions that folks might have, and hopefully we can answer them. And hopefully y'all had a good time at our presentation.
Yeah, so if y'all have any questions, you could actually raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can ask the question and we can just kind of have more of a conversation. Or you could just drop it in the chat as well.
I actually want to read out a question that somebody asked in here, just in case anybody who isn't actively watching but listening. Somebody by the name of John asked, do the Board of Supervisors typically have office hours for the people to visit? And just so we all know, yes, you can request that through an email. Maybe we could put the email to the Board of Supervisors in our chat box. I can do that for us. And you can call to book an appointment, and this will most likely happen via Zoom. Thank you, Rosaura, for putting that on the chat.
Yeah, so I'm dropping in the chat you'll find the information of the Board of Supervisors. This link will take you to Mary Adams, but you'll see to the left-hand side, District 1 through 5, the email address, the phone number of each of the members, their little map, their little bio, so you can see that. And then there's a question from Matt. Are they really building a juvenile hall at this moment? Yes.
Yes, the new juvenile hall that they're building is right next to the old juvenile hall. The process started maybe like 6-7 years ago, and it was supposed to be completed last year, but it's how do I say this in kind terms? It's over budget and it's overdue. So it's late and it's way over budget. I think it's like $10 million over budget. I might be wrong, but it's a lot of money, and it's definitely one of those things where our population and at juvenile hall is very low. I think we have about 35 on average young people there, and so we spend a lot of money just for young people to be there. But yes, short answer is yes, we're building a new juvenile hall.
And if you look at the data they reported to the BSEC from 2008 to now, you'll see the big drop of juveniles that are incarcerated. Like Alexis mentioned, there is about 30 youth right now. You know, they still, once again, it's been overdue. They had a couple of complications, as well as like they still don't have the kitchen or the laundry room built. So they've been taking quite some time.
And many of those youth there are there for probation violation. So they might have been there for, you know, truancy, or they might have been on probation for truancy or for something minor where like their parents can volunteer them to be put on probation también. But a lot of those young people are there for probation violations, which are like considered status offenses, which in short terms is like not actual crimes. They're there because they ran away from home, because they, you know, didn't go to school, because they had a dirty P test, because they were out late, because they were hanging out with people they might have not been hanging out. And so they might not have been supposed to be hanging out. So they're not necessarily there to, you know, protect people from, you know, violent people.
Yeah, so I will say, so thank you, Ronnie, for bringing this up. We are doing chalk and run. So people have been like Hector's on here, Chago from Bactun 12. I know Diana's on here, Bobby Joe's on here. So Bobby Joe and Ramon have been in Greenfield. There's folks that have been in Marina, Seaside, Castroville, Salinas. So chalk and run is really a way to get people involved by chalking, right? Being able to put out information in public places in different cities about the budget so that people can get involved in that way. So definitely feel free to connect. I'll put my email in the chat again so that you can get involved in your own city. But one of the other questions that I saw afterwards was from Natalie Olivas. Are there rules about moving designated funds to other funds?
So I think I just want to clarify the program revenues that are given to us from the state and the federal aid, those are strictly for certain departments. At least that's what I learned as I was doing research. So it's usually with health services and social services that will have a specific allotted amount that is coming from the state or Fed and going directly towards their departments. And I hope that answers your question. Those funds cannot be transitioned, cannot be moved. However, the discretionary funding that comes through our taxes is where we can get a lot of say as community members.
Yeah, so definitely there may be a department that requests, you know, certain amount of new staff. The Board of Supervisors has the option to, you know, not fund that thing and fund something else, or decrease the amount of funding a certain department gets and fund other departments. So they have some discretion, as Andrea mentioned. So they can make changes to whatever is proposed.
Yeah, so I'm going by order of the chat, and then John. So John had the next question, and he also raised his hand. So the question is Monterey County Behavioral Health funded by County General Fund? And I'm just going to go ahead and unmute you, John, so that you can just say whatever other comment.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you all. First of all, this is wonderful, very explanatory about how an important part of our local government works. I don't think I've been through this so understandably before. So my question was about Monterey County Behavioral Health. Much of what the solutions are, much of what the recommendations you put forward are really behavioral health based, prevention based, like you say, substance abuse, you know, other things that really prevent disease and catch it early on. So that's where the question comes from. Is Monterey County behavioral health and children's behavioral health, is that something that's a programmed fund, or is that non-programmed? And if it is non-programmed, well, I'll ask that part first, but the follow-up would be, if it is non-programmed funding, then where would that kind of funding for educational preventive behavioral health come from?
I want to tap into that real quick, and I'm sure that there's a lot that the rest of us panelists can share. Thank you for that question, John. As far as I've done with my own research, Monterey County Behavioral Health is based in Natividad Hospital, and Natividad Hospital is funded by the county. And there is a behavioral health commission. If you go onto the county website and you look under the boards, committees, and commissions that we mentioned earlier, you could actually become part of the behavioral health commission if you so wished. And then in that space, you could potentially voice your concerns and also attend the county budget meetings as well. I tried actually to see if I could offer more insight into how the spending looks within health and looks within Natividad Hospital, but to be honest, I couldn't find anything that I could share here that felt digestible and easy to convey. And I actually didn't find that much information that provided me with more information as to how the budget within behavioral health even looks. So I hope that answers a bit of your question. Alexis or Airam or Rasaura, anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to add and shout out to Nick from Agents of Change who worked on putting this information together via just research of the budget. So just there is no dedicated department that is for addiction and substance abuse services. So that is part of the problem. And hopefully that does answer your question, that we don't have like at least for addiction and substance abuse, there's no dedicated department for that.
And what about children's behavioral health? Monterey County Children's Behavioral Health? The funding for that would be programmed or non-programmed?
Thank you, John. My assumption is that it would be under both. I would assume they get some funding from the state to do specific type of programming, maybe serve low-income individuals in South Monterey County. But I think there's also sections of their budget that's more discretionary, where they can invest more in or move people or staff around or prioritize different sections of Monterey County behavioral health. So long story short, I think it would be a mixture of both. Some grants and funding is going to tie them to specific types of services, and then some grants are going to be based on availability, prioritization of or not grants, but funding is going to be prioritized based on what the county, determines as their priority.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, John. So this next question in the chat is shout out to Hector from Safe Ag, Safe Schools. He asks, how can folks organize to get a town hall with our respective supervisor to hear our concerns and hear their take on the budget?
Yeah, this is a good question. Thank you, Hector. What we can do, I mean, it depends on the type of issue. You can always call your board of supervisor. I think it would be hard to get all 5 of them just because it's in the same room, but you can always get the board of supervisor that you want to address by just, calling their office and trying to put something together. That's something that us as a coalition are actually trying to do with some of our board of supervisors to see where they stand on some of these demands and other issues in their community. But it's always good to try to put something together for them and invite them and say, we want to talk on this particular issue. If your issue is housing, where do you stand on it? How do you feel about this project? What can we be doing more? How can we be supporting more housing in our community? So there's definitely avenues to have community dialogue with, on a public scale with your board of supervisor.
Yeah, that's why I can say that it's very important to get to know who represents you and what area you live in, because towards the end of the day, they're there to represent us. Either they're there for the people or they're just focused on other areas that are not that important to our community needs.
I also wanted to add just to Hector's question as well, that last year, just a bunch of different community members from many different organizations wanted to do exactly that, Hector, is to organize a town hall. So we did one, I think it was in June, I can't quite remember, June or July. A bunch of different organizations, just regular people like you and me, were like, hey, we want our voices to be heard. And so we all got together, Zoom called, emails, sending out to all the different board of supervisors, asking them if they would be willing to show up, those of us who had connections. And one of them did show up. And so we were grateful. It was Barrera. And so he was there, and he listened. We were grateful. And many different people from the community came forth. We brought our own microphones. We had our own socially distanced, organization of a space. And it was very kind of like guerrilla style. Like we just, did it then and there, like very off the cuff, just figuring it out as we go. Scrappy, kind of like how this presentation is, like we're still learning as we go, and then we did another one just recently with everybody who's here, actually. That was back in, I can't quite remember, November, possibly. We did another town hall meeting. So I think utilizing the emails or the websites that I listed in the chat box too, connecting with the different organizations who want to do this work, and reaching out, like Idam and Alexis said.
Yeah. And yeah, and we do intend to share with y'all the recording of this once we upload it to YouTube. That's the goal, the presentation slides, but also for you to be able to have our emails, so that if you want to get in touch with the coalition work that we've been doing, we can definitely connect via email. So Carla Gonzalez asks, are there any conversations going on right now regarding an alternative healing informed repurposing of the Juvenile Hall facility? I know that I can say that MILPA has been working towards consolidating the Monterey County Youth Center into the Juvenile Hall, so that the actual Monterey County Youth Center can be repurposed for actual youth, just actual positive youth development. But of course, as far as I understand, like, I don't know of anybody else that's like talking about that. But that's the goal, right? It's like, how do we use existing buildings or resources in order to actually fund the needs of the community and to actually meet those needs, especially of the youth, right? That are leaving places of incarceration or otherwise, like providing, like even before the youth get involved in the system, right? Being able to provide them the resources that they need via education, via housing, via proper nutrition, whatever that may be, right? For them to be able to reach that self actualization, right? I think that's the ultimate goal, is like for people to have the resources that they need in order to become their full, to live up to their full potential, right? Feel free.
Yeah, and I think it's it's definitely part of the goal and part of the vision of what we want to see in our community, especially when we think about the closure of the youth center or the consolidation with the new juvenile hall. Imagine if so the youth center, I believe, is on Sanborn, and I'm sorry, I don't know my streets in Salinas, but it's on the corner intersection, like next to a funeral home. But it's a big plot of land, and imagine if they close that place down, what services could we offer in that place that was once used to house 25 youth for incarceration? What services, what kind of programs, what kind of resources can we offer there, aside from just putting people in a box and incarcerate? And it's also like a very large portion of land. So if they really wanted to, they could build more housing. They can have a rec center. They can have all the things that we kind of talked about today. Again, it's about priorities. What is it that our county is going to prioritize? And hopefully, it is something that looks like that.
Orale. And Andrea has shared in the chat like different like MILPA's website, Bactun 12, Agents of Change, Safe Ag, Safe Schools. I know, I believe Omar's on here. You could also go to chinampa.bio, their website. And then Beatriz Chaides asks, what times do they have these budget meetings? And so I understand that the Board of Supervisors, they meet on Tuesdays starting at 10:30, and then they have recess and then they come back at 1:30. And so the budget meetings, feel free to jump in We understand that they're going to be doing the review, pues ya es febrero, it's already February, but we're still kind of like looking out for like, when is that date going to be for like the actual budget? But feel free to jump in if y'all have more information.
Yeah, from my understanding, they should start meeting soon. We don't know exactly when. It may be already posted in their calendar, but it's just one of those things that we have to keep an eye on for. But usually, like Rosada said, they meet during the day. It's very long. If you can make it to the budget committee, it may be more specific to the specific budget. But oftentimes those those board of supervisor meetings are very long. There's items on the agenda, and sometimes one item can take 2-3 hours, 4 hours, and then they have a break. Or sometimes some items can take 15 minutes and they move on and they go on fast. So it just really all depends. So keep an eye on it. We'll do our best to try to bring awareness of when those meetings happen, so that folks like us can make it and voice our priorities. But definitely that's one of the benefits of kind of being in touch with our organizations, because we'll try to post that information so that you don't have to dig through their website.
Yes, and Maricela A asked, and this was an interesting question: are there any reasons given for choices my leaders made in the budget? So that really depends on like their own, I mean, that's what I would say, on their own interests, on their own, the pressure that they receive from their own constituents. But I'm sure that my folks, you'll have more interesting answers for that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. Something I wish I knew too. But it's just it's such a huge variety of like departments and decisions that we don't know sometimes who they're listening to or where they're getting their information from. We try to show up as much as possible and meet with them as much as possible, but it's so many players, so many moving parts that it's hard to say who directly influences them and why they made those decisions, because it's a lot of decisions and a lot of moving parts and a lot of players.
I also wanted just to add, I mean, that's a really good question, and it kind of has me stumped as well. Like, what are the reasons, but it's such a loaded and heavy question, because we think about the relevancy of the budget too. Prior to 2020, maybe in the year 2000, or 1980, like what was our county looking like? What was the priority? What were the priorities then? And what were the big decisions that were made, a decade ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? And how did that impact the way that the budget looked? And how has that created like a legacy that we're living now? And how are we as community members still affected by decisions made before that are still kind of, how do you say, like there's an acceptance of how money should be spent based on what previous people in policy making positions have done. So I think that, if you were to look at any other city budget, or county budget, and you would compare what the Monterey County looks like compared to, say, Los Angeles or San Francisco, you might see that, oh wow, like there is a huge amount of money leaning towards this department versus this department. Or education looks like across the board it's kind of getting the slimmest part of the pie. And I think that, I mean, that can go into a huge discussion around like politics and decision making and the history of the spending. But I just wanted to note that, previous decisions, all to say, I think a lot of previous decisions that were made with the budget have impacted the way that we view it now. And I think it develops like a sense of comfort and continuing what is accepted, continuing what is okay, what we all have accepted from before, and what we wanted to see that change. So I hope that isn't too confusing, but I'm trying to convey this kind of muddied idea over.
Yeah, and then Hector asked, can people submit comments if they are not able to attend the Board of Supervisors meeting due to work? Yes. I'm gonna drop in the chat. This is the agenda from yesterday. Hopefully y'all can see it. Let me know if you can click on it. And if anything, I'll just drop the link. But the agenda actually includes, which I'm just gonna bring it up on my little thing, that the agenda actually includes like a Zoom, or rather like if you want to attend via Zoom, you can do that, watch via YouTube. But I guess the question is submitting public comment. You could submit an email. The Monday, so Monday before 5 p.m. And it includes the email address where to send it to. Sorry, I'm like trying to bring this thing up, but let me drop in the little Monterey Registrar, and y'all can see the agenda from there.
While you're posting that to the chat, I'll read the next question. This is from Bernie. Can someone elaborate on the need and or importance of community participation at these committees during the budget season?
Yeah, I can say it's very important because usually we deal with symptoms, right? Just the basic symptoms that's like community violence, mental health, the lack of mental health funding, the lack of, just health in general, So we usually don't start feeling the symptoms till after. And then we start wondering like, hey, well, why has this funding been cut? Why aren't we focusing on this issue? So it's very important for us to show up to these committees, for us to put pressure on these folks that represent us, because towards the end of the day, we are lacking in mental health funding, and funding for our youth, funding for our community. So, it's just very important because we start feeling the symptoms till after, and then we start questioning like, oh, what could we have done about it? So it's very important for us to stay informed and to actually put pressure on our elected officials and even on these committees on what we want, right? Start showing up on the meetings. Public comment is very important because you usually see other organizations show up and keep asking for more and more money, and the lack of representation of our community is not there. We just lack on that representation. So once again, we don't want to feel the symptoms after, so it's very important for us to start showing up and putting pressure on elected officials.
Yeah, that's a good question, Bernie. Thank you. It's one of those things where like Airam said, the departments are always going to be there to advocate for themselves. So there's always going to be somebody from that department saying like, invest in the things that we want. But there's nobody there is forced from the community to be there and say, invest in these things. So that's why we have to take some type of action. And the hard part is if that we don't show up, then we really have no voice. And the way I always like to look at it, the way that Andrea was breaking down that budget cycle is like January, the Board of Supervisors, or it's like think about your home, you get a budget, you get paid in January, and then you start, putting together your wish list in February. But if you were like a kid and that was your mom that got paid, like you would want to tell her during the time like that she was putting together her budget, her wish list of things that she's gonna spend her paycheck on. You would want to tell her when she's putting that list together, or when she's at the store, right? When she's at the store, shopping for stuff and putting stuff in the cart. That's when you would want to be like, hey, get this too. Because the hard part is that if we wait until they're at the front of the line and they're paying and you're saying, hey, I want a super soaker también, and you're like, take that back. We don't need that. So it's one of those things where if we come early, if we come the more involved at the beginning of the process, the more probable it is that they'll actually listen to what we're trying to say. So that's why that what Andrea talked about, that sweet spot between February and April, the more advocacy that we can do during that time, the better it is for us to actually get the things that we want in June.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what I said earlier, what's happening right now between February, March, and April is the county manager is taking all these requests, people who are showing up to those meetings are being heard, and whoever their commissioner is going to be a big voice to the Board of Supervisors. So these different commissions are requesting their funding right now, and they're planning what next year's budget is going to look like, because right now we're just rolling through the budget that's already been decided, but we want to show up to these meetings so that we can have an impact of what it will look like in the year to come. So showing up now, again, like Alexis was saying, is like that, is like preparing and not showing up at the last minute when those decisions that we want to see made can't get made anymore because the line has already been or the doors have been closed. You know, June 30th, the doors closed. Sorry. Oh, you want to see more funding in that department? Well, sorry. The recommended budget's done. It's already been adopted. It's over. And if by chance, you know, they accepted it with the potential for revisions, those revisions need to all be added by October 2nd. So then October 2nd would be the cutoff date, you know, but even then those are just revisions. There's already a whole recommended budget that's been created with the potential for revisions. So June 30th, you know, harsh date, recommended budget done, and then potential revisions up until October 2nd. And then it's done, you know, we just are going to accept as it is. And there can be probably smaller revisions made, but right now, the sweet spot is that like it's still being decided. There's nothing set in stone yet. And by being a large or by being a big voice and showing up to these community committee meetings, we get our voices heard. And I think that makes an impact.
Yeah, and something that's really important to consider is that the county departments, their leads, they're always going to get a really long time to do their presentations and pitch their ideas of why they should get more money. But us as community members only get 3 minutes. So we're really like limited as to how much we can present or persuade, whereas the departments are always going to have the advantage because they're always going to have, you know, 1-hour presentations with, you know, 30, 45 minutes of questions and feedback and what if this and what if that. We don't get that. We just get, you know, our 3 minutes. And so if, you know, 100 of us show up, you know, we got, you know, a big chunk of time to say, this is what we want. So the more, the better.
I'm just going to say too, send in public comments too. Because if you were to go to like a committee meeting and you feel like you're not being heard enough or your voice isn't being accepted or whatever, you're a newbie, you could potentially even send in a public comment at a Board of Supervisors meeting and be like, I've been attending blank committee and here's what my experience is, because they'll give you up to like, I think it's 2 minutes or 150 words. I can't remember exactly what the public comment limit is, but that's just another thing I wanted to share as well.
Yeah, and I was actually checking like the Facebook and stuff like that, but did y'all answer the comment question that Rob Garcia had? Have any organizations introduced adopted programs that can help solve any of the issues? For example, Downtown Streets team. I mean, I can say that in a way, like the coalition that we've been building, like we're trying to address those issues, right? Via the work of Agents of Change, which they're doing like really awesome work around the homeless sweeps in Salinas, right? So that's one, you know, and otherwise Chinampa, Safe Ag, Safe Schools, and Baktun 12 in their own capacity and their own, like what they focus on. Each organization is, you know, has their particular focus. And MILPA, you know, we've been trying to, we've been trying to figure out like, well, what are the resources that are available? What are the programs that can be adopted? I know we're also part of like a Monterey County orgs, like Instagram chat, and people are always talking about like, hey, this is what's happening in Santa Clara. This is how they're resolving homelessness, right? Or like, is this in Monterey County? And so I think we're like trying to find the answers like together, because we, like, as single people, like we don't know the answers, right? And like it could feel overwhelming and really solitary, but like together, you know, we're trying to bridge those gaps of information. So we're trying to do that through the coalition work, but of course, like we can always grow and expand and learn new ways of organizing that can include just more solutions. So you're always welcome to join. Is there any other questions from folks? Righty. Well, with that, I'll pass it to our facilitators. Just want to thank you each, Airam, Andrea, Alexis, and shout out to Beatriz for translating. Thank you, thank you. All right, well, I'll pass it to y'all. If you have any type of closing, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Once again, it's an honor and a privilege. We don't know everything. We don't claim to know everything. We're not experts, but we do try to put as much information out as we can, and we try to get our voices heard. And we hope that y'all can help us in doing a little bit of advocacy for your community and for your pueblo, your community, whatever that looks like. So thank you all so much for taking the time. It's a Wednesday. It's late, so hopefully y'all have a good dinner and a good place to lay your head. Thank you all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank y'all for joining. Remember that your voice does matter. You know, your presence does matter. There's definitely a need in our community, you know, and it's our time. And once again, thank y'all for joining.
Just wanted to note that we will be sending an email out after this, kind of like a survey, and also just with some information that we shared today, so you can have that for your own records and you can refer to it. And if this is something that you saw valuable and that you think there's others who would appreciate it too, we encourage you to share. So thanks again, and have a good night, everybody.